There was an old apartment building on the edge of town where the rent was low and no one ever stayed long. Sarah, a broke college student, was desperate for a place to live. She ignored the warnings, figuring the rumors were just small-town superstition. The first night was uneventful. She unpacked her few belongings, grateful to have a roof over her head. But as the second night approached, things started to feel off. A strange, cold draft seemed to follow her around the apartment, though all the windows were closed. That evening, as she lay in bed, she heard it, a faint whisper. At first, she thought it was her neighbors, but it was different. The voice didn't come from next door. It came from inside the walls. "Help me!" Sarah froze, her heart pounding. She held her breath, straining to listen. Maybe it was her imagination, but there it was again. "Please, find me!" Her blood turned cold. The voice was desperate, soft and hollow. She jumped out of bed, trying to convince herself it was a trick of the mind. But then she heard a different sound, a rhythmic tap, 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 coming from the wall behind her bed. Terrified, she pressed her ear to the cold plaster. The tapping grew louder, faster, as though someone, or something, was inside, clawing to get out. She backed away, her hand trembling as she grabbed her phone. There was no service. The whispers returned, now overlapping, dozens of them, like the walls themselves were alive with voices of the damned. Panicked, she grabbed her keys and bolted for the door. But the second she turned the knob, a violent gust of wind slammed it shut. She was trapped. The walls around her began to groan, shifting unnaturally. Faint outlines of hands pressed through the wallpaper, dragging long, bony fingers down the surface. The voices became screams now, terrifying, blood-curdling screams of torment. Sarah backed into the center of the room, her mind racing. She had to get out. She had to... Suddenly, the tapping stopped. The whispers ceased, leaving a suffocating silence. Sarah stood frozen, waiting. The quiet was worse than the noise. Then, in the corner of her eye, she saw it. A small crack forming in the wall across the room. The crack slowly widened, peeling apart like skin. Through the growing gap, Sarah saw something that made her stomach drop. A hollow, lifeless face with empty black eyes peering out from within the walls. It smiled. The whispers returned, louder than ever. "Join us!" they echoed. Sarah screamed as the walls closed in, the face reaching out with long, twisted fingers. The walls rippled as if they were alive, pulling her toward them. And then, silence. Days later, the apartment was listed for rent again. The landlord didn't ask questions. He never did. Rent was cheap, and there was always someone desperate enough to move in. And if you listen carefully late at night, you can still hear Sarah's voice, whispering from the walls. "Help me!"